Ever get that, like, heart in your throat feeling? You're just about to snag that, I don't know, that super rare, limited edition whatever, or maybe you're hitting refresh for, like, a huge announcement, and then bam, nothing. Site just dies, spins, gives you the cold shoulder.
Oh yeah, we've all been there. Digital world takes a little siesta right when you need it most.
It's the worst. And that whole experience, that's kind of our jumping off point for today's deep dive. We're going deep on why those website meltdowns happen and how the tech world tries to prevent them. You ready to dig into load testing?
Absolutely. Time to dissect those digital traffic jams.
Load testing. Now, it might sound, I don't know, something for engineers in lab coats, but really it's all about checking how a website or an app holds up when a ton of people are all trying to use it at once, right? Like a stress test, but for the digital world.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it this way. It's like testing a stadium before the big game. You got to make sure the gates can handle the rush, the snack bars don't run dry, right? That kind of thing.
So it's making sure things don't go haywire when the crowds show up, but in a controlled way, before the real users hit the site, right?
Spot on. We're talking about finding those bottlenecks, those digital choke points that slow everything down, and making sure everything's stable, ready to go live without a hitch. But the big thing is finding out the absolute limit, how much the app can take before it starts to freak out.
Pushing it to the edge, but safely. Okay, so we're not just talking about like Black Friday on Amazon, are we? This applies to what, any website or app that gets a lot of traffic?
Pretty much. Internal networks, public websites, you name it. If it's got multiple users jumping on at the same time, and these days what doesn't, then yeah, load testing's a good idea.
And I think what really drove home the why for me was looking at some of these real-world examples. Like, remember that whole ToysRUse.com fiasco? Huge ad campaign, tons of hype, and then boom, website goes kaput. Talk about a marketing fail.
Oh yeah, classic case of neglecting load testing. Cost them big time, I bet. And our source material had a bunch of other examples too, like that airline website that crashed during a ticket sale, or even Encyclopedia Britannica, offering free access and then their site just tanks for weeks.
Ouch. So even the big guys aren't immune. And speaking of users, our sources say most people will bounce if a page takes more than like 8 seconds to load. That's what, like 3 sips of coffee? Not much time to make an impression.
Nope, not at all. And when you zoom out, think about the financial impact. Our source said something crazy like $4.4 billion lost every year because of bad website performance. That's not just a slate button click, that's like a whole chain reaction of fail.
So load testing isn't just a techie thing. It's like a business necessity.
Right.
I mean, it builds confidence, it catches problems early, and it helps make sure your digital storefront is open for business when it counts.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive, heading off those issues before they hit your users. And the source material gets into specifics about what problems load testing can actually uncover. We're talking things like how long it takes for each action on the site to finish, how the servers and databases, all that behind the scenes stuff, how it all holds up under pressure, and even the time it takes for data to travel from the user to the server and back.
Right, so it's like a full checkup, but for your website under real-world conditions.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the goal is to see if you need to tweak the software, upgrade the hardware, or maybe both to make sure the user experience is smooth. Right.
You got it. Now, we've talked about what load testing is and why it matters. Let's dive into how it actually works. Where do you even begin? Our sources talked about some key steps you need to take before you even start testing.
Okay, so before you even fire up the test, what needs to be in place?
So first off, response time. That's like the golden metric in load testing. How fast does the app react to what the user's doing? And before you even run a test, you got to know what a good response time looks like for each action. Are we even tracking those right now? Are they relevant to what users are doing? Can we even achieve them with our current system? And can we accurately measure them?
So you need a baseline, a target to aim for before you start throwing traffic at it. Makes sense. And then there's the whole, the environment where you run these tests. You can't just do this on any old network, can you?
Definitely not. The source was pretty clear about needing a dedicated test environment. You need the right hardware for your servers, enough processing power, memory, all that. And then you've got your load generators. Those are the machines that simulate all those users. And how the network's set up and the software configurations, that all matters too. You want to mirror your real live environment as closely as possible to get accurate results.
Got it. Okay, so you've got your test environment set up. Now, how do you actually do the load testing? What are the different ways to go about it?
Well, there's the manual way, but our source pretty much said that's a no-go. too hard to repeat consistently, to measure accurately, and to coordinate all those virtual users by hand. And then some organizations build their own tools, which can be super customized, tailored to their exact needs.
And then there are those ready-made solutions, right? Like open source tools, which are good if you're on a budget, but they might not have all the fancy features of the paid ones. And then you've got the enterprise-grade tools, the ones with all the bells and whistles.
You got it. And those high-end tools, they can do things like record real user sessions and replay them. They support all sorts of internet protocols, and they can simulate tons of users, like tens of thousands, maybe even more.
Wow. Okay. So once you've got your environment and your tools sorted, what's the actual process of running a load test? Walk us through it.
Okay, so first things first. You set up that dedicated test environment we talked about. Then you define your test scenarios. What are those virtual users going to be doing? And which transactions in the app are the most important to test under pressure? You got to prep some realistic data, too. Can't just have a bunch of empty requests hitting the server.
Makes sense. You want to mimic how real users would actually use the app. So what's next?
You got to figure out how many users are going to be hitting the system at the same time and think about their internet speeds. Are they on super fast connections or slow mobile networks? What web browsers are they using? What operating systems? And of course, you need to understand how all your servers are configured.
Okay, so you've created your virtual users, planned out what they'll be doing, you've got the data ready, and the environment is all set up. Time to hit go on the test, right?
Pretty much. You kick off those test scenarios, and while it's running, you're watching everything like a hawk. Response time, server load, errors, all of it. Then, once it's done, you dig into the data, find those bottlenecks and weak spots, and figure out how to fix them, maybe tweak the code, adjust the hardware, that kind of thing. And then importantly, you got to run the test again to see if your changes actually worked. It's like a constant cycle of testing, analyzing, tweaking, and testing again.
Constantly improving. I like it.
Yeah.
Now, our source also had some good tips for making sure your load testing is actually effective.
Yeah.
Best practices, so to speak.
Yeah. Big one was don't even start load testing until your app is functionally stable. You don't want to waste time chasing performance problems that are actually caused by bugs in the code, right? They also said to use a big, diverse set of data for your tests, so it really reflects how people actually use the app. And when you're designing your tests, think about how many virtual users are going to be doing each action.
Right, like you'd have way more users browsing products than, I don't know, writing reviews.
Yep.
What other tips did they have?
They said not to get too detailed with your logs during the test. It can hog resources on the server and mess up your results. Same with downloading images. Try to avoid that in your main tests. And lastly, they said to keep an eye on how consistent the response times are across multiple runs of the test. You want to spot any weird fluctuations or inconsistencies.
Makes sense. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Our source made a clear distinction between load testing and stress testing. I gotta admit, I always get those mixed up. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. They both involve pushing the app hard, but the goal is different. Load testing, like we've been talking about, is about finding those bottlenecks under normal expected loads, seeing how the system reacts as more and more users pile on. Stress testing, though, that's about pushing it way past its limits, finding its breaking point, seeing how it recovers from a crash.
So load testing is like everyday rush hour, and stress testing is like a citywide blackout.
That's a good way to put it. Load testing helps you figure out peak performance, how many servers you need, what the typical response times will be when things are busy. Stress testing is about resilience. Will it crash? How long to get back online if it does? Load testing works within limits. Stress testing goes way past them.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. Now, our source also talk about functional testing and how it's different from load testing.
Yeah, functional testing is about making sure the app does what it's supposed to, step by step. The results are usually predictable because you know exactly what you're testing and what should happen. Load testing, though, the results can be kind of unpredictable. Performance can change a lot depending on how much load you're throwing at it.
So functional is, does it work right? And load testing is, how well does it work when it's slammed?
Bingo. And you do functional testing all the time throughout development. Load testing usually happens later when the basic functionality is all there. And functional testing depends on the specific data you use, while load testing depends on how many users you're simulating.
Gotcha. Now, our source mentioned a specific tool, Load Runner from HP. What do they say about that one?
They said it's designed to test performance under both normal and peak loads, and it does that by creating virtual users to simulate real user traffic, like a virtual stadium full of people clicking and browsing. They also mention it shows the results graphically, which makes it easier to understand all that data.
Yeah, visuals definitely help. Okay, last but not least, our source went over the pros and cons of load testing. Let's start with the good stuff. What are the benefits?
Big one is finding those performance bottlenecks before you go live. Saves you a lot of headaches later. And it helps you make sure your system can grow with your user base, scale up as needed. Load testing can also really reduce the risk of your system crashing unexpectedly, which, like we said, can be a financial nightmare and hurt your reputation. By fixing performance problems early, you're saving money and keeping your customers happy.
Sounds like a win-win. Any downsides we should know about?
Well, they did mention that some of the tools, especially the fancy ones, might need some coding skills to set up and use. And the tools themselves can be expensive, especially the ones that handle a ton of virtual users.
So there's the cost of expertise and software to consider. But overall, sounds like the benefits outweigh the risks, especially when you think about what could happen if you launch a website or app that just can't handle the heat.
I'd say so. It's an investment in the future of your digital services, which is, well, it's kind of everything these days, isn't it?
It really is. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into load testing. It's definitely more than just a technical thing. It's about making sure the digital world we all rely on can actually handle, well, us.
Absolutely. And remember, like our source said, it all starts with those basics, having clear performance goals and a solid test environment. And understanding the different ways to approach load testing, from designing the tests to analyzing the results and making improvements.
And knowing the difference between load testing, stress testing, and functional testing. They all have their place in building reliable apps and websites.
For sure. And while tools like LoadRunner can be super helpful, it's good to weigh the pros, like finding bottlenecks and scaling up easily, against the cons, like needing specific skills and the cost of the software.
So it all comes down to this: knowing how your app or website will behave when the virtual crowds come knocking, being ready for those big moments and making sure the experience is smooth and frustration-free for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, here's something to think about. Everything online is so interconnected now. One little click can trigger a chain reaction across tons of different systems. So what do you think is the biggest challenge in making sure all those systems work together seamlessly, even when millions of people are using them at once?
It's a tough question for sure. But hey, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Say